we continue from essentially where we left, and to, today I'm going to say many things in praise of what are called quaternions, and that way I would make you connect the notions from group theory, your intuition about rotation and matrices, and a way to connect the entire story to some quite interesting piece of history in mathematics. Okay, so I start with the recollection. We have seen rotations, right? So rotations in R3, and let me just say that we are convinced about it. They correspond to matrices, right? And what were those? They were 3 by 3 matrices. A with uh, real entries, that means real numbers as entries, such that those conditions were holding, such that we were having a distance preserving condition, which gave us that A transpose A is identity 3 by 3 matrix, and the determinant is, and you might have seen some matrices in tutorials as well. So that is what we are convinced about. And in yesterday's tutorial, I had written certain matrices, and in the lecture also. So say R theta x, R theta y, R theta z. So these were rotations, right? So these were rotations. Say R theta x is rotation. Rotation by theta, keeping x-axis as the axis of rotation. And I had explicitly given to you an expression for r theta x. So that is again the recollection. So recall that r theta x had an expression not so complicated. So 1 0 0 1 0 0, and then we had cos theta minus sine theta cos theta, and we had a reasonable good intuition on why it should work. Okay. uh, my question would be to complicate the situation and then simplify the situation. Hmm? So what's the general question? So general question is that, okay, here your axis is nice, your axis is x-axis, but if I give you an arbitrary axis, right? If I give some random direction, and then I say, okay, now you rotate by angle of theta, then how would you react? Okay, so the question is, so in general, okay, if you are given a unit vector, if a unit vector, so here x-axis, I am just taking x-axis is represented by, say, the unit vector 1, 0, 0, right? So in general, if a unit vector u is given to us, and I'm just writing u as ux, uy, uz, that arbitrary unit vector is given to us, and we are asked to rotate about this axis, rotate about u. So about u meaning u as axis, right? By the angle theta, by angle theta, and then what would be this matrix? Then how would you express the, how would you express this? Okay, that is the question. I hope I'm able to make sense of the question. Yeah. So any direction is given to us and the angle is theta. So can we explicitly write a matrix of rotation for arbitrary direction? That is the question. Okay. Uh, since answer is complicated and it is essentially computational exercise in linear algebra, I won't ask you to solve it here because even if I start solving, I will certainly goof up. So rather than doing all this, let me just give you the answer. And this is a challenging exercise, a computational exercise. So what would it involve is that you rotate your system of axis, your XYZ coordinates in such a way so that U aligns with one of these things. Say U aligns with X-axis. Okay, so some kind of rotation, or you do some manipulation on your coordinate system, and then you appeal to these matrices, which are kind of very standard rotation matrices. And if I am to write the answer, then I'll have to start it from here because answer is somewhat long. Yeah, perhaps I could have shown it, but anyway, I'm just writing it, and I don't remember the answer. So that shows answer is really complicated. So I'm just writing it, huh? And it's just to scare you to start with, and then we simplify our life. So answer is ux square. Ux is this these coordinates of the unit vector. So 1 minus cos theta plus cos theta, and then um, yeah, I have to write small ux uy 1 minus cos theta minus uz sin theta, and then ux uz 1 minus cos theta plus uy sin theta, and then an expression which looks very much like this. So I'll just copy it perhaps and make some changes. So this is ux uy. So ux uy 1 minus cos theta plus ux sine theta, and then it looks very much like this. So u y square 1 minus cos theta plus cos theta. Yeah, life is complicated. So u y u z 1 minus cos theta minus ux sine theta, and last row is ux uz 1 minus cos theta minus u y sine theta. So it's scary. It's scary to me for sure. And see, I am copying. Even then, I am not writing it correctly. U y u z 1 minus cos theta plus ux sine theta, and this is uz square 1 minus cos theta. Finally, plus cos theta. Okay, so this is some matrix which I am saying is general rotation matrix. And if you want to, if you are very enthusiastic about it, then you check that it is indeed a rotation matrix and check that this matrix satisfies this because it's rotation matrix. So it's genuine for us to make this calculation r theta. So AA transpose, right, is equal to identity and its determinant is 1. So you can try to check it. So what's the purpose here of scaring you? The purpose is to say that if you rely on matrices for all the rotations, then computationally it might be very challenging. Okay, so if I ask you to compose two arbitrary rotations, so if I give you one axis u and some other axis uv, some other axis v, and one is by angle theta, that is by angle phi, and then two such matrices will be there, and then you compose the rotation, one rotation after the other, and then I ask you, okay, if the the resultant is another rotation, then you tell me the axis of the net resultant rotation, and that's going to be extremely complicated with such expressions. Okay, so I guess you understand that if we blindly start using matrices for rotations, then there could be some practical issues. In fact, there are certain situations where uh, people are required to make computations, not just in theory, in application also, in uh, in various things. For example, video games. When animators do something, they're having certain transformations. In many of them are actually spatial rotations. They are rotations in space. So that is from one side, but even otherwise, the spacecrafts and all that, they have to maintain certain alignment, and for that they have to have a certain rotational adjustment so that uh, they are proper as per their needs. So for all those things, you need certain calculations, and calculations should be faster and not as lazy calculations depending on such horrible matrices. Okay, so purpose is to uh, simplify the situation. So and the message is that so the message that we get is that rotation matrices seem to be somewhat, not somewhat, a lot difficult uh, to handle. Okay. And therefore the question is that do we have easier ways of managing this situation? Easier ways to manage calculations involving spatial rotations. And when I say spatial rotations, what do I mean? Spatial meaning they are in R3. Okay, that's the meaning, spatial rotations. Uh, this this is a reasonable question because of the following. Because if we go to the plane, if we go to R2, okay, so that as a remark I can say so remark is that in R2 these are actually complex numbers. Can handle rotations, and you know how, right? Perhaps that was an exercise yesterday. And how is that? Because if I take rotation matrix, see on one hand I have in R2 cos theta minus sine theta cos theta, that is the rotation matrix. And when I multiply with AB, I get the new coordinates, right? A cos theta minus B sine theta, and say A sine theta plus B cos theta. But we can look at the same situation as if it is not matrix multiplication, but it is complex multiplication, right? So in place of the entire matrix, if I just consider cos theta plus I sine theta as a complex number, right? I can think of it as a complex number, and rather than thinking this vector uh, as a column, I can think of it as a plus ib. And if I multiply these complex numbers, what would I get? I get a cos theta, and then iota I square is minus 1. I get minus b sine theta plus I, and now I will get for the item, so a sine theta plus uh, uh, there's one more term, right? So a sine theta I've done, and then b cos theta, right? So these match, right? So this, of course, looks like this, exactly same, and say this one looks like this, right? This is exactly the same actually. So we could use in R2 complex numbers to manage rotations. So the question is that in R uh, 3, that in the space, can we manage something like complex numbers to manage rotations? Answer is not that simple because it occupied people for a long time, and it was more of an academic curiosity that time in 19th century than a need from applicative viewpoint. But in 20th century this also became applicative because many branches of engineering, started using rotations, and much recently animators started using rotations. So anyway, let's come back to the question, which was for this spatial thing, and answer to this is, now we know. Yes, and answer is not as simple as complex numbers, and the answer comes through quaternions, and I'll therefore introduce you to quaternions. So if even if you're not able to really understand much in earlier lectures, you can think of next part of the lecture as like independent discussion. So you can come back to this and you can learn quaternions at least. Okay, so the answer is yes, using quaternions. So quaternions therefore are going to deserve special place in today's lecture. And if I could say something about quaternions, well, before saying something about quaternions, let me just say, uh, so they were discovered, sorry, by this gentleman called Hamilton, now almost 120, no, 175 years ago, 1843, while taking a walk. So he was Irish mathematician in Dublin. He was just walking around, and suddenly he had an idea. And the story is that on the stone near a bridge, he just scratched the stone and wrote certain formula, which became very useful and popular that time. Okay, so there is a whole history of Hamilton, and I won't really go into that. And in fact, I'm going to make presentation which is somewhat in different flavor. And there is a nice reference. A very good reference is an article by van der Waalen, van der Waardin, and it's called on Hamilton's discovery of quaternions. Okay, so all that is historical part, and actually it also exhibits that how an academic idea turns out to be quite useful. Okay. Okay. So I have not said a single word about quaternions except that I am trying to lay a foundation so that so that quaternions could be appreciated by us. Yeah. So what's a quaternion? And I would try to be as simple because sometimes we learn it in more abstract term. I am fond of it, but here I think it's better to make it in such a way so that we all appreciate it. And right now, our immediate need is to understand rotations, right? So definition. So definition is that a quaternion is a pair. It's a pair of a scalar. So first participant in the pair is one scalar and a vector. So vector meaning I'm just taking it in R3, and scalar, that means I'm taking it in R. Okay. So how will I write a quaternion? I'll write a quaternion as Q, and Q is, say, let me just say lambda 0 and U. Okay. So lambda 0 is scalar and U is a vector. Okay. And just to fix notations, U is UX, UY, UZ, and often we will be taking U as a unit vector wherever needed. Okay. But not always. Often U would be a unit vector as if it is our axis, right? But not always, yeah. So far, you are with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is, so I have not said anything at all here. I have just said that you think of a scalar, think of a vector, just look at them together, stare at them together, and that is quaternion for you. But that doesn't make you appreciate quaternion, right? So I have to say something more. And before I say something more, I just say that another notation for quaternion which we give, because I'll be using both the notations, both have their merits. So we also write it as Q is lambda 0 plus UX I check, as if IJK are my directions. UY J check and UZ, not check, this is head. UZ K head. Okay, to express a quaternion. Which quaternion? Q is equal to lambda naught UX UY UZ. Okay, and as we have seen, quaternion is let me just say it, four-dimensional object. Okay. Now, what is so special about quaternions? Yeah. So good thing is that you can add two quaternions. Uh, One may add two quaternions, and you can guess how the addition will happen, right? How? If I take a quaternion Q1 and just let me say this is lambda 0 U, and another quaternion say Q2 is there, which is say mu 0 V, and then you know how I'm going to add it, right? Any answers? So then the addition is defined as what? Lambda 0 plus mu
Plus
0.
mu 0 u
Yes.
comma b, u
Yeah.
plus b.
U plus V, exactly. Okay. In maths, just defining things is not enough unless it is useful. Even more useful thing than the addition is, so addition, I'm just defining it. I'll just put it with some color, and I'll also put this in a box so that you remember it. But there is something more, something more. We may also multiply these two, because in case of complex numbers, you see, to understand rotation, in case of complex numbers, it was multiplication which was important, right? So there we had some two-dimensional objects, namely complex numbers, two-dimensional over reals. Here I am having four-dimensional objects over reals. Okay, so we may also multiply them. Also, so to say, multiply them. And this multiplication is something which which is path breaking concept actually. uh, People were trying to, before Hamilton, they were trying to multiply two vectors. You know, if I give you vector in R3, another vector in R3, how will you multiply those two vectors? Well, one can say I'll take dot product, right? So if you take dot product, the problem is that answer is actually scalar, right? So in imagination is that you multiply two vectors and answer is a vector. You can say, okay, I'll take the cross product. And I hope you remember the cross product, right? In physics and in maths in class 12th, I guess we have studied the cross product. We take two vectors and then the direction is actually orthogonal to the plane, which is spanned by those two vectors. And the magnitude is like the area of the parallelogram, which is made by these two vectors. That is the rough physical interpretation. Yeah, but the problem with this kind of thing is that if I do this, and if I do, are these equal? If I take cross product, u cross v I take first and then cross with w, or first I take v cross w and then take cross with u. Are these equal or are they different? Someone has some memory of cross product?
These are not equal.
These are not equal, and even worse actually, their directions are not the same. The direction of this will be orthogonal to the plane of u cross v and w, and here the direction will be orthogonal to the plane of v cross w and u. Okay, so even the directions are not same. What are we talking about then, right? So associativity is not there. So these were not the good things, and people were just trying to discover some kind of associative, nice multiplication law on R3. And there are many attempts actually. And the Van der Waals article has all those all that information. Nevertheless, let's come back. So how are we multiplying them? And that is actually fascinating. And I'm telling you how the multiplication is going. So I'm defining this multiplication to be, I take the two scalars lambda 0, mu 0, and I'm subtracting from it the dot product, which is scalar. Okay, comma, what else I'm doing? Now I have to have a vector. So what vector am I going to assign to it? And the vector is actually very interesting. So u cross V. Okay, so U cross V not yet over plus lambda 0, the scalar of this, with vector of other one. So lambda 0 V plus scalar of this, vector of other, plus mu 0 U. Okay, and this I will look at with great respect and regard. This actually changed the way people were thinking of mathematics in the 19th century. I would go to that extent, saying, okay, this is extremely important thing. So at the moment it looks like something, some random arrangement, some which is not really very insightful as of now. But anyway, have a look at it and be happy with at least the following. Here is an expression which has the information of dot product as well as cross product, as well as scalar multiplication by vector, as well as addition of two vectors, right? So it is a very nice database of lot of uh, vector manipulations which you can imagine. Yeah. So just to say all that, so this is dot. Sorry. Yeah. So this is, one is dot product, another is cross product. So are you with me so far? I have not done anything. I have just defined something for you. And for those who would like me to recall what cross product was, so if you take U to be say maybe maybe in much simpler term, I'll just say x1 y x1 y1 z1, and say V to be say x2 y2 z2, then U cross V, the the cross product is, I guess people would remember. So this is you take cross here, so y1 z2 minus z1 y2, and then you take z1 x2 minus x1 z2, and then you take uh, x1 y2 minus y1 x2. Okay, so somewhere uh, you are taking some determinant and all that thing, right? So these are three determinants which are arranged in this way. Okay, so this was cross product, and let me just go back to our notation. So I said this is yet another way of looking at it, where I'm taking simply the summation. So this is just, when I say plus, I'm just formally adding it, meaning as such, or maybe in other words, in four-dimensional vector space, I'm treating scalars as if they are having one dimension, and other dimensions are coming from vectors. So totally there are four dimensions. So when I look at this, when I look at quaternion as this addition, as a formal addition, then how does it look like? Uh, so just to understand the multiplication somewhat more, if say uh, So what is that? I'm just writing it again. Lambda 0 u first quaternion, second quaternion is mu 0 v, and if well, I should put this if down. So if u and v both are zero, both are zero vectors. Oh, I really don't like to put zero as a vector, because then you'll ask me the direction of zero. I don't want to say this is the zero element of the vector space. So if they are zero, then what would be q1 q2? Can someone tell me now? And I'll just show you the formula. So if u and v both are zero, then what's the answer? What's the product of the two quaternions?
Lambda naught mu naught.
Pardon? Yeah, exactly. So this is lambda naught mu naught, and the other thing is zero vector, right? Because the cross product is zero and the entire term, the entire vector part of the quaternion is zero. So you can therefore think that so these are called scalars. Okay, so that is if, okay, let me just write it down. So thus if q1 q2 are purely scalars, okay, vector part is zero, then q1 q2 is just the multiplication of real numbers, right? That is fine. And what if they are purely vectors? So if lambda 0 is 0 and mu 0 is also 0. So this was the first scenario. Fine. Second scenario is when they are purely vectors. Okay. So next scenario is coming here. So tell me. So then what is going to happen with q1 q2?
U dot v comma u cross v.
Yeah, u dot v will come plus or minus. Let's go back
Minus.
with minus, right?
Yes, minus u dot.
Yeah, so I would put minus, comma,
U cross V.
okay, u cross v. That's right, huh? So if they're purely vectors, then I'm getting the information of cross product as well as dot product. I hope you can appreciate it. That like this thing is arranged in such a way that you get back your older data. And further, let's say uh, uh, if further, that means in this case only, say u is equal to v. So it is just the same case. Then what do you have? Then q1 q2 is how much? Minus u dot u, right? And what would come here? If you have two parallel vectors or equal vectors, what is their cross product?
Sir, 0.
0.
0. Yeah, because there is a degenerate parallelogram, right? Parallelogram doesn't have an area if you wish to think it that way. So this is interesting. This is interesting because here what is happening, I am taking two pure vectors, right? Because lambda 0, mu 0, both are 0, and I'm taking two pure vectors, and their quaternionic multiplication is actually a scalar. Okay, and that is essentially coming from the part of the dot product. So you are with me on all this, right? So and maybe one more thing I can just say. Maybe I can just extend this line just to say that, okay, this is one case, this is entirely one case. Okay. And in our other language where we were taking ijk, so remark is that in other notation where we had taken q as lambda 0 plus mu xi plus mu yj plus mu not mu, uzk, what do we have? What would be I square? Can someone tell what is I square and j square? Let's go back to this. So if I want to calculate I square, then I'm in just this situation, right? I'm just in this situation where I'm having pure vector. I square is a pure vector, right? So this could be called as case of pure vectors. Yeah. So in case of pure vectors, what do we have?
-1, 0.
Yeah, -1, 0. And here also I have -1, 0. So I have gotten something whose square is like scalar -1. Such things should ring bell, right? Think, so maybe some complex numbers are also embedded somewhere in quaternions, right? And if you do k square, it's also like that. An interesting thing is, what about I into j? How much will it be?
0, 0,
Huh? 0 comma?
Sir, 1.
0, 1.
1 is not a scalar. Oh, sorry, 1 is not a
0,
vector.
k.
It's actually 0 comma k. So you take I as what? 100 and j as 010. Try with the cross
0,
product.
k. Yes, 0, k.
It's 0 comma k. Yeah. And what about j into I? First thing I know, 0.
minus k.
minus k.
Minus k. Okay. Huh. So that is interesting. That means what? Our multiplication, quaternionic multiplication is
Not adding.
yes, is not commutative, right? I hope you are with me so far. You are answering, so I'm happy. Okay. So quaternionic multiplication is not commutative. I would continue my maybe that could be that could be given as an exercise. So you check that if I take Q1, Q2, Q3, if I take three quaternions, I multiply them first in like Q2 and Q3, and if I multiply Q1, Q2 first, and then take Q3, then they're actually equal. Okay, so this quaternionic multiplication is
Associative.
yes. I would say this is magical to me because you are putting cross product, dot product, some random combination, and it turns out to be associative, right? God is kind to us in that sense. Good. Uh, there are more things which you should check. You should check more, namely, oh, oh, you should check namely that the distributivity. So Q1, Q2 plus Q3 is Q1, Q2 plus Q1, Q3. So all those high school algebra things do fit well in quaternionic case except for commutativity. Okay, except for commutativity, and somewhere we should be happy that commutativity is not there, because somewhere in our back of mind we also have that matrix multiplication is not commutative, and we are understanding rotations through matrix multiplication, and rotations are also not commutative, right? If you first perform some rotation and change the order afterwards, the final resultant is different. Okay, so somewhere we are happy that life is not commutative, and we are happy that life is associative in the realm of quaternions. And with all this, I can just keep a notation, and notation is that of H is in the honor of Hamilton. So this is choice of scalar, choice of vector, together with addition and multiplication as defined above. Yeah. So we have addition and multiplication, and together with all that, that is called H. And the name of this object, after just what did I do? It's moving. Yeah. Your screen is visible now.
Yes, sir.
There was a movement on the screen. I had put wrong button. Okay. So with all this, this is called Hamilton's quaternion algebra. Okay, so this is Hamilton's quaternion algebra together with all those operations. Okay, now like in complex numbers we have complex conjugate, we also have quaternionic conjugate, and that's extremely important concept. So conjugate of a quaternion. So I take a quaternion Q, which is lambda 0 U, and its conjugate is I'm defining quaternionic conjugate. Quaternionic conjugate I define like Q bar. Like what happens in case of complex numbers? Similar kind of story. I keep the real part same and vector part I take minus. So I take minus U. Yeah. So that is quaternionic conjugate, and we'll see what's the use of having the notion of quaternionic conjugate. Uh, yeah. So this is vector part and scalar part like this. Let's see. If I multiply a complex number with its conjugate, then I know this answer is a square plus b square, right? So here I am multiplying a number with its quaternionic conjugate. Will you help me at this stage and tell me what is the answer?
So lambda naught square.
Lambda naught square. That was the easiest thing. I could do that. After that, I wanted help. Shall I just paste the formula somewhere? The
Then
multiply.
-1.
अभी रुको. -1. Why -1? Maybe I'll just copy paste it. Yeah, from here.
No, sir, it's not -1. I misinterpreted it.
But I'm happy you are thinking. Thank you.
So minus mod u square.
So it would
Uh,
be minus the magnitude of u square.
Minus or plus?
So
So it would
plus
be
magnitude of u square.
Plus magnitude of u square. Yeah.
plus.
U dot u, which you are saying is uh, yeah, magnitude of u square. Yeah. So this
And then
is
0.
lambda naught square plus magnitude of u square. Yes, that's right. Square थोड़ा बड़ा कर देते हैं. हाँ. And then which vector? 0.
Yes, a 0.
Right? So when you multiply a quaternion with its conjugate, what you are getting is actually, shall we confidently call it the magnitude of Q? Yeah, because the scalar part is also
Yes.
contributing in a way as if what we had is a four-dimensional vector x1, x2, x3, x4, and what I'm having is sum of four squares. And life cannot be better than this. So let's designate it the name of magnitude. Okay, so that is the definition which is coming up. Uh, I prefer to call it length. Maybe is it okay? Magnitude is no, it's overused term in, but anyway, length is also overused. But कोई बात नहीं. So I say L of Q. I hope you will allow me to make this definition. Square root of uh, lambda 0 square plus, yeah, let's just call it length. Length of a quaternion. Okay. And by abuse of language, let me also just write it. This is q bar square root. Although somewhere in the back of my mind, I know that q bar has a vector part, but since that vector part is 0, I am taking an advantage of the fact that the vector part is 0 and the scalar part is positive, and therefore I can take the square root. Yeah, fine. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And this will give me very, very interesting thing, which I just love. Uh, so first thing is easier. Observe the following, that number one, what's the meaning of LQ being 0? A quaternion is 0 if and only if, tell me. So length of a quaternion is 0 if and only if, what?
Vector component is 0.
Vector component. What was scalar component?
Scalar component is 1.
See, this is a square and this is magnitude square. So this quantity is 0 if and only if lambda naught and both are 0.
Both are 0.
Both are 0.
Both are 0.
Yes, yes.
You are with me? Yeah. So somewhere you should have no recollection of what happened in our lives when we learned complex numbers. So if and only if q is what? 0. Uh, I'm putting vector 0. You
0
pardon
scalar
me.
and 0 vector.
Yeah, just pardon me for putting direction with 0. Okay. But this is just to make things clear. Although I consider it as my crime to do that. Okay. Second thing is, this is interesting. This is very interesting. So every non-zero quaternion, so this is 0 quaternion, meaning the quaternion of length 0. So every non-zero quaternion has a multiplicative inverse. Okay. So how do I convince myself for that? Exactly the way I did for complex numbers. Okay. So if I have q, which is an arbitrary quaternion, and then I would say that q inverse, then q inverse is actually 1 divided by length. I should say 1 divided by length, or length square, perhaps. Length square. 1 divided by length square times lambda 0 minus u. Right? What's the answer? Answer is just, you just multiply these two. Since q times, and here you have 1 by lambda q square. So when I write 1 by lambda q square, I'm scaling both. Lambda 0 minus u. So this is q bar simply, right? This is q bar. So I'm just saying, since this times q bar, right, is what? Is 1. Okay, q square will come outside. Yeah. Square will come outside. Yeah. So this is q bar. Q bar, which is up there and LQ square down there, and by definition of L cube, by the definition of length, this is equal to 1. Okay, so this is another amazing thing which I got, that Q inverse is simply like this. And with all that, what are we to conclude? To sum it up, right? So conclusion of the entire discussion for last half an hour or so, even more, much more, is that if I take non-zero quaternions, then this is a group under multiplication, right?
Amit, have we
Yeah.
also checked that the product of two non-zero quaternion is again non-zero quaternion?
Uh, I have not checked it, but what I can say is that if you take it through the length, then the length will be multiplicative. So maybe I should remark here. Yeah, thank you for just 1 minute. Yeah. So also check that the length is multiplicative. LQ1 Q2 is actually LQ1 times LQ2. So you have to check all that. And using that, you try to conclude that. You try to conclude that if you take uh, non-zero quaternions, then the product is also going to be non-zero. And when I say non-zero, that means uh, at least one of the parts, either scalar part or vector part, is not zero. Yeah. So thanks, Professor Geeta, for that. And that is the conclusion, that multiplication uh, makes non-zero quaternions a group. So that group is interesting. And I had promised you uh, I promised that I'll connect this the discussion of quaternions with rotation, and I am almost there. I can also create one more group, which is called norm one quaternions. So you consider this, and for some reason, let me just call it S3. What is S3? S3 is a collection of those quaternions such that their length is 1. Then it so turns out that this is a subgroup. So check it. Check that it is a subgroup. Okay. So this turns out to be subgroup, which is not difficult to check. If you take two norm one quaternions, if you take norm meaning the length one quaternions, then their the product is also like that, and inverse and all that, everything. And I'm calling it S3 because it's like a sphere, x1 square plus x2 square plus x3 square plus x4 square is equal to 1, right? It's like that. So on the sphere, we have put some kind of multiplication law, and that sphere is what we are relying upon for our rotation. So far I have not said anything about rotation after the discussion of quaternions, and now is the first time I am going to say something about it. So what I do is I consider, So back to rotations. Yeah. So I take a unit vector, and that unit vector is u, and what's the job of the unit vector in our discussion? It will act as axis, right? Think of it, or maybe say, what thing? It is our axis. To act as axis of a rotation. Okay. And take an angle theta. So you know that we are going to talk about rotation. So this is angle of rotation. And you remember, I scared you in the beginning for the arbitrary situation when there is arbitrary unit vector and arbitrary angle. Then my first job today in the morning, in the first half of the lecture, was to scare you with this expression, which I have forgotten. Well, never had it in my mind. I just copied it. Such a complex thing. So r theta u. So now I am going to do the entire process in much more with much more neat discussion. Okay, so this is axis, and here is my rotation angle. And then what you do, you consider the following. You consider this quaternion, the following quaternion. So quaternion is q, and its vector, so its scalar part is cos theta by 2. Okay, and what is the scalar part? What's the vector part? Vector part is, you take sine theta by 2 and you multiply it with the unit vector. So you take this quaternion, and what should we observe? You should observe that. Can you make a guess on the length of this quaternion? Yeah.
So 1.
Yeah, it is 1. So yeah, you're right. So this quaternion is capturing rotation data, right? Rotation data meaning information of axis and the angle. And the observation is correct. Yes, this is 1. This is the quaternion of length 1. It's easy check. Well, it's just cos square theta, sine square theta, 1, that kind of argument. And the unit vector has norm 1. And now you take a vector. So now we take a vector P. And we want to know what happens to this vector when I rotate it by an angle of theta with u as the axis, right? This is we want to know what is this, right? That is the objective. That's the purpose. So here is my rotation data, and here is my candidate, my vector, my point. This is my point, right? So this is a point in the space which I want to rotate. And I'm curious, where does it go? Which point in space will it go to after rotation? And I'll just write one statement and then try to comment on that. Then what you do is you consider Q, which is my quaternionic data. Where is that? You consider this Q, right? And then you consider this quaternion, which is 0p. This is the vector to be rotated, that information. And then you consider Q inverse. Every non-zero quaternion is invertible. So in particular, every norm1 quaternion is going to be invertible. So you consider this. Then this turns out to be, so this needs check. Needs to be checked just once, and then you can use it. I'm not going to check it. So it just turns out that this is actually equal to 0 and this vector. That's all. That's all. So this is extremely important. This statement. So what am I saying is that you take a quaternion. Which quaternion? A quaternion which is having the information of the rotation data, and you take the conjugation as if you are having a group conjugation, right? Q, some element in the group, Q inverse, okay? And after conjugating, whatever you will get is actually first the scalar part is going to be 0, and the vector part is precisely what you were looking for, okay? There could be many ways of checking. There are some more conceptual ways, and I won't be able to describe them at the moment, but the most crude way for you would be just to fight with this matrix, which I showed you in the beginning, this matrix. Just to plug in this matrix, and you use the quaternion multiplication inverse all your knowledge of quaternions to come up with this. So this exercise would be wonderful if someone can carry out, then that has a lot of value in understanding of rotations. Okay, so therefore quaternions are useful to understand rotations. Are useful to uh, uh, understand rotations, and they're even more useful because you know they are coming with a geometry. Yeah. So you see this H comes with a geometry. And I'll tell you what's the meaning of that geometry. Because in H, you can see what's the distance of 2 points. That means if you want to consider two rotations, how much do they differ? And therefore, a rotation using Quaternions may also be used for what we may call uh, interpolation. Problem. So what is an example of interpolation problem? Suppose you are having a video game or some animation, right, where two positions are given of the same object. Okay, so of course that's kind of rigid motion. The same object is just moving in some other way, and you have to show it in a continuous fashion. So what you can do is that you can consider the one position, you can consider another position. So those two things will be expressing 2 points in the quaternions, and you can draw a path within the quaternion because it comes with the geometry. So within the quaternion algebra, you can draw a path, and according to whatever points are approaching on that path, you can show the entire animation in very smooth way. And for this reason, it is used, such concepts are used widely in animation programs. And here is a interesting piece of history, maybe trivia. If you see there was a moon mission from NASA long back. So Apollo 11, I guess. This was 1969. And during that mission, they refused to use quaternions because they thought quaternions are too complicated, and there is non-commutativity, which is something absurd and all that. And they used what are called Euler angles to understand rotations. So I have not talked about Euler angles, but they used in the Apollo mission Euler angles, used what is called Euler angles, and they actually rejected quaternions to monitor alignments or to monitor rotations which were relevant for their purpose. And they came up, they just landed into a serious problem, and that led to a serious problem. And that's actually a problem which is more in engineering, called gimbal lock problem. And I'm not going to talk as such about that problem, but I'm saying all this in the praise of quaternions, because if you try to move away from quaternions thinking it's complicated, then you would actually seriously land into certain issues which are not natural. If you think naturally in terms of quaternions, the message is that thinking of rotations in terms of quaternions is the most natural way, and even for practical purposes, that's the most efficient way. Okay, and calculations are much easier provided you understand what quaternions are, and that was my purpose of today's lecture. Yeah, so perhaps with that I would stop. There are some intuitions into which go into understanding of quaternions and praise of quaternions, and those are having something to do with algebraic topology in terms of what are called two-fold covers and all that, but I'm not going to have a discussion on that. I think this much is enough for today. So with that, I stop, and people are welcome to ask questions. Yeah. Are people there? That's my favorite question.
Yes, we are here, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
So do we have a question then?
Amit, can I
Yeah. Please.
So when you define the multiplication, the quaternions, and then you showed that I square equals j square equals k square is -1, and ij k, what happens in when you multiply those.
Yeah,
So I mean, so if we take these as a sort of basic rule, which is what you have in your group of quaternions,
absolutely. Yeah,
then you could probably define the multiplication via these rules,
that
right?
is correct. Yeah. Yeah, so what Professor Geeta Venkataman is mentioning is that since we hope to have this multiplication to be distributive and additive and all that nice properties, so we can consider the base elements, the basis elements I, J, K, and see how the multiplication is dealt at that level of basis, and then you can extend it by linearity to the entire space, entire H. So these can be thought of as basic rules. Yeah, in fact, I did not pay much attention to it. Of course, this is my personal favorite way of doing it, as you may realize, yeah, because this also leads to what is called generalized quaternion, and that is what I am personally interested in. But yes, you can understand the entire quaternion algebra in terms of what happens on IJK. So these are kind of, so to say, defining relations of an algebra or algebra generated by these relations, four-dimensional algebra, and that defines quaternionic multiplication entirely, avoiding explicit expressions like what I showed you. Explicit expressions like this can be avoided. But I thought that since I would be like doing it with undergraduate students, this I thought would be more much easier approach to convince things, because no, algebra generated and all that is somewhat abstract concept. And maybe what Professor Venkataman also mentioned is that I can consider these IJKs and this quaternionic multiplication, and you can consider a group, right? You can consider things like IJK, right? And I already know that IJ is equal to K. And then I can have I square, which is -1, right? And then I can have minus I, minus J, minus K. Of course, the squares of J square and K, squares of J and K are also -1. And what is absolutely needed to form a group is 1, right? So this is actually a non-abelian group. Of order 8, which is different from the dihedral group, which is different from the group of rotations of or group of symmetries of a square. And this has a name, Q8 or Q2, I don't know, Q8. This is called quaternion. What is it called? Quaternionic group or
Quaternion group of order 8.
quaternion group of order 8. So the reason that it is quaternion group of order 8 is that the information of the multiplication is actually coming from what we discussed today. Yeah.
One more question, Amit.
Yes.
So, so the Hamiltonians are that's an algebra. So it's a ring which is also a vector space over your real numbers.
Right.
So can we see the complex ring as being embedded into the Hamiltonians?
Yeah. That's in many ways, not just in one way. So if you take a favorite complex number of yours, and favorite complex number is always like a plus ib,
Mhm.
and then you can think of, so this is of course to start with a complex number, that's my thought, and then I can think of it as a quaternion, which is what quaternion, I can think of it as 0 or not 0 a, and then I can have b00.
Hmm.
Okay, and this is my quaternion, right? So I can think of as if complex numbers are embedded inside H. And this embedding is respecting multiplication. That is important.
And conjugation as well.
Yeah, multiplication and conjugation. Conjugation is like that bar, that minus, because conjugation is a minus ib, and here also it's a minus, right? And the thing is that here I seem to be favoring one particular coordinate, which is first coordinate of my vector part, but that's not necessary. I can put it in the second part or third part, or maybe in entirely some other unit vector part. Any vector which is having a square -1, right? So I really don't need to be doing favoritism with one vector. I can do it with anything, any vector which is having -1 as its square. So any element of the quaternion with -1 as its magnitude, not magnitude, whatever, this any quaternion with q bar is -1. Sorry, q square is -1 can be taken for the purpose. So yes, in a nutshell, yes, it is embedded inside complex. So this is what you may call it within quotes, doubling of complex numbers. So it's like, so these complex numbers could be thought of as, within quotes, doubling of real numbers. And this is doubling of complex numbers in that sense, but we lose commutativity. And in fact, there are procedures through which we can do doubling of quaternions, and in those cases, we lose even associativity, and those are more of academic interests. Yes. Yeah, thank you for nice remarks, Professor Gita. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for this insightful lecture. If there are any more questions, please you may ask. On that note, we will continue with the tutorial at 2 p.m. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you everyone for participating in the workshop, and thank you everyone for completing the quiz. So here we begin with the valedictory session. So first of all, let's begin with the group photograph. So please everybody can turn on their videos. Okay, so let's start. Cheese. Okay, so now I would like to invite some of the participants to say something, to give their feedback and comments. Who would like to contribute? Please click on the raise button. Yeah, Anandita, you can go ahead. So Anandita, please introduce yourself first, and you can on your video as well.
Thank you, ma'am. So my name is Anandita and I am from Atmaram Sanatan Dharm College, University of Delhi. I am a second year student. So the workshop, it has been really insightful for me. It was a very interesting journey for all these 3 days. I have learned a lot more in these 3 days than I expected while I was enrolling in, and that too in an engrossing manner. So it was a lot interesting to see teachers demonstrating whatever they teach. Both Amit sir and Geeta ma'am made sure of that. They used examples, some online tools, some facts about the things they were teaching. For example, a history of the origin of groups and all the other topics that they were going with. So I'm really glad that I could be a part of this, and thank you mentors and teachers for being such a good support all through the workshop. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anandita. Priyanka, you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am. So my name is Priyanka, and I'm in my second year, and I'm from Hansraj College. And I literally loved the workshop, like the way it was conducted and the idea, like how the topics were taught to us, and the tute sessions, of course, like we were taking doubts like in small groups, wherein it was, easier to contact and to learn. And I really liked the workshop a lot, like all the 3 days. And have thought of going into the depth of some of the topics. And yeah, and thank you so much to all the teachers who organized it, and all like the professors, Geeta ma'am, Amit ma'am, and all other teachers. Thank you so much, everyone. It was really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Anita?
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, dear, you are audible.
Okay. A very good afternoon to all of you. Myself, Anita from Miranda House, pursuing a BSc Mathematics Honors and currently in second year. So I really like this workshop. The preceding 3 days were very informative and thought-provoking for all of us. This workshop have been an amazing and enlightening experience for the student like me who have been a keen interest in group theory. Actually, from my second semester itself, I started to like the group theory a lot. And after this workshop really encouraged me to engross more in group theory. Although I have learned many new things in this workshop, the topics covered in this workshop were very new for me. But I really appreciate the way ma'am and sir explain the topic in a very comprehensive manner and make them interesting. There are two things which I found which excited me the most. First one is the counting puzzle problem, in which we try to find out all distinguishable eye card or the necklace using Burnside lemma. I found this example as a very realistic, a very relevant real life example in which we can use our group theory knowledge. And the second thing which Amit sir has told, that there are only 5 polyhedron which can be inscribed in a sphere, while in R2 every polygon can be inscribed in a circle. I found these two things very interesting and exciting, and these things arouse my curiosity to discover group theory in depth. The most interesting part of this workshop was the time allotted for the tutorials. The questions provided in the tutorial sheets were really very helpful understanding the concept of the topic in a better way. The tutorial discussions were very insightful and the mentor also was very supportive. Honestly saying, I didn't get each and everything told by the sir and ma'am, but whatever new concept I encountered in the last 3 days encouraged me a lot. So I would like to thank you, Geeta ma'am and Amit sir, for sharing their valuable knowledge, and this was such a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thank you, dear. Thank you so much. So now let's invite someone from the mentors to say something, like how was the workshop for you? What did you experience? Who would like to share? Yeah, so we have with us Dr. Bhavneet has raised her hand. Dr. Bhavneet is from LSR College. Bhavneet ma'am, please go ahead.
Yeah, am I audible? I'm
Yes.
sorry, my video is not starting. I don't know why. So, greetings first of all to Professor Geeta, Dr. Amit, colleagues of Miranda House, fellow mentors, and students. First and the foremost, I would like to wish my sincere thanks and gratitude to the Mathematics Department of Miranda House for organizing a workshop par excellence on group theory. The Mathematics Department of Miranda House has been organizing student-centric workshops for the holistic development of students across the Delhi University. And I would say kudos to them and the organizing team, because it's a lot of work. When the poster actually was posted on DU Maths, frankly, it caught my attention purely because it had lectures of Professor Geeta and Dr. Amit. And Professor Geeta, I would like to say that you have an amazing art of delivering lectures the way you do. I must say magical, and with so much love and passion that we actually start loving the topic, and you too. And frankly, I would again say I admire the patience in you, the stability in your delivery, which makes your lectures even more interesting. I have heard you often though in my college, And during the time, if you remember, we worked on mathematical awareness course in IEEE around 2003 and 4. So I heard a lot uh, from you at that time. And your lectures were so interesting ever since. I heard Dr. Amit and Professor Geeta at a teacher enrichment program, as I earlier also said, in Shivaji College, which I thoroughly enjoyed and I had a lot to take from. But since this workshop was for students, I thought I missed the opportunity. But when I got to know about the mentorship program, I was elated because I thought it would be a great opportunity to be with students, yet simultaneously learn from celebrated teachers like you both. I would like to add that I really admired how how learned Dr. Amit is, and yet so simple and grounded. And I would say pleasantness, sir, in your voice adds to the sweetness in your class, which makes them more interesting. With the teachers so dedicated, how can't the students and the mentors be? So we all listened very attentively and patiently. And we had an interactive session as mentors with the students, which I thoroughly enjoyed. All of us have learned a lot and enjoyed a lot, which was evident in the fruitful discussions we had in the two groups. There is a lot to take back from this workshop, and I sincerely hope to be back to Miranda House and hope to meet you all personally. My sincere thanks are also due to Dr. Ritu, Dr. Meetu, and dear Shweta for organizing this workshop flawlessly and working on every minute detail. Thank you so much. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Bhavneet ma'am. Now I would like to invite Dr. Meetu Bhatia Grover, coordinator of the workshop, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Shweta. Good afternoon, everyone. Respected Professor Venkatraman, Professor Kulshresht, mentors, and dear students. It is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of Mathematics, Miranda House. I extend my sincere thanks to Principal Ma'am Dr. Nanda for providing the necessary infrastructure for conducting this workshop. I express my gratitude to the honorable and learned speakers for sparing their precious time for this workshop. Their years of experience, deep learning, and ability to present group theory in such an interesting and geometric way has resulted in one of the most memorable workshops. My special thanks to Dr. Dalti, our teacher in charge, Dr. Ritu Gupta, my companion and workshop coordinator, Dr. Shweta Gandhi and Mr. Manoj Rawal, co-coordinators of the workshop, for being our backbone in this endeavor and managing this workshop with their continuous hard work and zeal. I'm thankful to our mentors and student volunteers for their constant support. I'm also grateful to all our students for their active participation and do hope they have enhanced their knowledge during this workshop and taking something back. Once again, thanks to all and best wishes.
Geeta ma'am and Amit sir, you would like to say something?
Yes, definitely. I've really enjoyed, I think, the whole experience. So first of all, thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this. And the moment and also I think I was even more interested when I knew Amit was going to be part of this as well. Because as Bhavneet had mentioned, we intersected during the Shivaji College TU lectures, and I mean, this gave us an opportunity to sort of think and put together and figure out what topics we could do, which would also blend with each other. And I must say, and like Bhavneet has also mentioned, I'm very impressed with the way you people have organized this whole thing. You have extremely, you started so early, often what tends to happen is that you you get a request just a week, 10 days before the event, and then you're you don't quite know how to say no, but or you don't want to say yes either. Whereas in your case, it was so much in advance that you had already asked. So it allowed me, certainly, because these days, because of my administrative tasks, I mean, I keep getting caught up in too many things. And it's always wonderful when I know I have to do some bit of mathematics and I can set aside that time. So, and very, I think all the meetings that we had, whether it was phone conversations or, everything was planned and we were very clear as to what we had to, provide at every stage. So that was very well done. I'm assuming that this is only one amongst a series which has already taken place and will take place further as well. So all the best. And I think you're doing a very good task, and particularly for all the students. I would also urge you to open it out to beyond DU students, because now that we are online, it can actually be open to students from across the country, so that is something that you should think about in your future activities. And again, because it's online, you can actually accommodate um, quite a few students, as long as it is not a hands-on kind of workshop. uh, so that those are two things that you can look into for your future activities, and I wish you all the success. And I've really enjoyed myself, and I've
Thank you so
enjoyed
much, ma'am.
Amit's talks, so I've attended most of them as well. And I have to say one thing is, Amit can actually also do his lectures in Hindi. If you ever require someone to do maths lectures in Hindi, then you should catch hold of Amit for that.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your motivation and inspiring words. Amit sir, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to say everything that Professor Geeta has said, but in somewhat reverse direction. So I was also excited when I came to know that it's Professor Geeta who is going to be part of this, and everything goes like tick, 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 exactly same thing, but in the reverse direction, variables, values just exchanged. Apart from that, one few more things maybe. One is certainly you guys have done great job, the entire team, organizing team. So I must really thank you to give us an opportunity to connect with the students of Delhi University at large. And as Professor Geeta said, perhaps we could take advantage of the situation that we are virtual, and therefore we can extend it to some other parts of country, particularly the ones where people may not be that privileged. Perhaps that could be nice gesture from the Miranda House. Other thing which I would like to add there is again taking advantage of the pandemic situation and subsequent advantages that we have gotten over here, virtual mode, because now we are forced to record our board work, right? Everything is recorded. It's there in the form of PDF files with you. So perhaps an idea could be that maybe one of the student volunteers can take it up. You can latex these things, each uh, at least the summary part of what has happened in the workshop. And over the years, perhaps because I know that Miranda House has been successfully organizing such workshops over years in different domains, analysis as well, in many parts of algebra. So in the longer run, you can come up with a kind of workshop proceedings, which could be like 15 pages, 20 pages each workshop. And maybe in the next 5 years, we may end up having something like 100, 150 pages, very nice write-ups, which students would like to read. So that could be our contribution at large to the students, because the set of students would change. And if you are the same speakers, perhaps next time I may not be as excited as I am this time, right? Because it might be repetition of topics and all that. So if we can collect the entire proceeding in very academic form, and this will also help students who end up latexing this thing, and that could be just compiled, and that would be great contribution from a prestigious college such as Miranda House and such an illustrious team. So that's something which I just wanted to put forward, and I really enjoyed. The students also asked good questions, and I wish if it could be offline, and we could meet in person, could have what we call coffee hours, because I'm made to learn in maths that coffee is something which enhances the level of interaction among mathematicians. So yes, I missed your coffee and your pakoras last time I was there. Dr. Dalti had invited me that time, and I cherished in interacting with students at those occasions as well. So maybe next time, hopefully. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shweta and Dr. Ritu, Dr. Meetu, and Dr. Dalti, and the Dr. Manoj, and the entire team. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Anyone else would like to say something? So I would end the valedictory session by a quote. A teacher is always a student until he dies. If he is no more a student, then teacher within himself dies. So this is what I learned from this workshop, being a teacher. And I think everybody is a teacher, even student is a teacher. And it's vice versa. So thank you so much, everyone. Looking forward to meet you in future. Thank
Yes,
you.
hopefully physically. Thank you, everyone. And thanks once again. And of course, it's so nice to see so many familiar faces, after a long time. So bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Geeta ma'am. Thank you, Amit sir.
Bye, Manoj.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thanks.